Have you ever heard an atheist say this?
Any God that demands worship is not a God that I would follow. God is arrogant and full of narcissism and vanity.
I mean, Richard Dawkins says in his book, The God Delusion, God is obsessed with his own superiority over rival gods. The God of the Bible seems to seek attention and crave praise, an altogether unflattering characteristic. He's out to make a name for himself and delivers his people from Egypt for the sake of his name. So, is this true about God? That's what I intend to answer in this video. Before we get started, I'd like to ask you to drop a like on this video and subscribe if you like this content. And also consider becoming a channel member to support this ministry. All you gotta do is hit the join button below. So is this pride on God's part? I think that word might be getting thrown around a little loosely here. I mean, what is pride? Pride is simply an inflated view of ourselves. Pride is really a lie about our own identity or achievements, taking credit where credit isn't due. So could you say this about God? Why does God demand our worship? Well, if you think of God of who he truly is, then there's no reason to say that God is proud or arrogant. God, by definition, is the greatest conceivable being, which automatically makes him worthy of worship. I mean, you're the greatest being. So God doesn't take more credit than he deserves. He has a realistic view of himself. He is the greatest conceivable being, completely pure, holy, and good. God does not have a false, exaggerated view of himself. Actually, what we see in Scripture, if we read all of Scripture, like some people out there, it's not pride from God that we see. We see God has an accurate view of himself, and we see humility from God. You might be saying, what? Humility from God? Yeah, people forget about the life and sacrifice of Jesus when they speak about God being an evil, prideful being. If God was full of pride and arrogance, why do we see his humility in places like Philippians 2? In Philippians 2 it says, "Who, being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by taking the very nature of a servant. Being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man, he humbled himself by becoming obedient to death, even death on a cross." This is something that's not said of any other God in any other religion. God voluntarily set aside divine privileges and took on the form of a servant. This is the greatest act of humility ever. The God of the universe humbled himself. He didn't have to, but he humbled himself and took on the form of a man, performed service to his creation, and went to the cross and endured pain and suffering and death. And he did all of this because he loves us. Why do atheists seem to leave that part out when attacking the character of God? They seem to want to hang on to a false view of God in the Old Testament in order to attack the God of the Bible because they don't like him. Most times this argument comes from the side of emotion over fact. And you know, there's a great book out there that answers every question of the so-called evil acts of God in the Old Testament. It's called Is God a Moral Monster by Paul Copan. I've been reading this on my Kindle and it is an absolute gold mine of information, the context of the Old Testament, and it deals with all these so-called problem passages. You know, it takes you through the scriptures atheists use to accuse God of moral evil or pride or whatever it is. Which, by the way, is quite strange because if you're an atheist, I'm not sure where you're getting your objective view of morality from to, you know, call God evil or prideful, but that's another video. So I hope this video was helpful and gives you something to respond to some of these questions with. If you like an in-depth video on any specific scriptures used to argue for God's evil or pride, leave a comment below and leave a like to help support this ministry. Every like goes a long way in pushing my videos out to new people. I would really appreciate that. And I appreciate you all watching. Feel free to subscribe for more content like this, and I'll see you next time.